The day my husband died, my daughter-in-law walked into the hospital room, not with tears, not with concern, but with a smirk. And the very first words out of her mouth weren't, "Are you okay?" or, "I'm so sorry." She looked me in the eye and said, "Well, you're just a burden now." Before we continue, please write in the comments which country you're watching this video from, and please subscribe the channel for more such stories. Enjoy the story. I'm Judith, I'm 67. I had a good life. Not a perfect one, but good. My husband Carl was my everything. We were married for 41 years, raised one son, David. We didn't have much, but we worked hard. He drove trucks. I worked nights at a diner. We made it work. And then, just like that, Carl was gone. A sudden heart attack. 1 second we were laughing at a rerun of Jeopardy. The next I was dialing 911 with trembling fingers and screaming his name. They couldn't save him. The funeral was quiet, small. David and his wife Brianna flew in from Atlanta. They stood next to me, but it was like they were a mile away. Brianna barely looked up from her phone. She cried once, but I'm not sure it was for Carl. 3 days after we laid him to rest, I sat at the dining table, his chair still pulled out across from mine, just trying to breathe through the silence. David cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk." Brianna chimed in before he could continue. "You can't stay here alone." I blinked. "I've lived here for 37 years. She shrugged. "Exactly. It's too much house, too many memories. And let's be honest, you're not exactly in your prime anymore." I stared at her. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, sipping from a wine glass she hadn't even asked to pour. "You're just a burden now. We'll clean the place up, sell it, and you'll come stay with us. It's the logical choice." David didn't speak, just looked down at the table like he always did when things got uncomfortable. That's when I realized. This wasn't about helping me. It was about taking from me. Carl had built this home with his hands. We had worked hard to pay off every last cent of the mortgage, and now that he was gone, they saw me as nothing more than an old woman standing in the way of a property listing. I swallowed my grief and said nothing. Not yet. A week later, I flew with them to Atlanta. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd sort things out, grieve properly, and come back home. But temporary quickly turned into trapped. Brianna gave me the guest room, bare, windowless, and next to the laundry where the noise never stopped. She said it was just until we renovate. She locked away my phone for safety, saying she'd manage my calls and appointments from her own. She even changed the passcode on the Wi-Fi so I couldn't use my laptop anymore. "Too much screen time isn't good for your age," she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. David, he stayed quiet, worked long hours, always tired, always distracted. When I tried to talk to him, he just nodded and kissed my forehead like I was some fragile, confused creature. But I wasn't confused. I was watching as Brianna wore my jewelry, Carl's last gift to me, saying it was just borrowed. Watching her talk to real estate agents on the phone late at night. Watching her burn letters Carl had written me saying, "What's the point of keeping all this sad stuff?" I didn't cry. Not yet. Because I knew what was happening. They thought I was weak. They thought I had no options. They thought I was just a burden. But they were about to learn something important. I may have lost my husband, but I hadn't lost myself. And I was done being quiet. It started with the smallest things. The keys to my storage trunk in their garage mysteriously vanished. Then my purse, where I kept my ID, cash, and wedding ring, disappeared for 3 whole days. When I asked about it, Brianna laughed and said, "You probably just misplaced it, Judith. That happens. At your age." Her words always had a blade hidden inside them. Not enough to scream about, but just enough to make me bleed on the inside. David barely looked up from his phone anymore. When I asked him to help me call a friend from church, he said, "Mom, you don't need to talk to people back there. You're here now. Focus on adjusting." Adjusting? To what? To being invisible? To walking on eggshells in a house I wasn't even allowed to call home? They began locking the front door with a key I didn't have. They'd say, "Oh, sorry, just forgot." But it kept happening. And I noticed the food in the fridge was suddenly labeled. Brianna's lunch. Do not touch. Meal prepped. Stay out. Even my name wasn't on anything anymore. I was slipping out of their world like a shadow they were trying to erase. And then one evening, I overheard a phone call I wasn't meant to hear. Brianna was in the kitchen, on speaker. I was in the hallway, moving slow enough not to be noticed. The voice on the other end asked, "So, the house is nearly cleaned out?" Brianna replied, "Almost. We'll list it soon. Judith's not using it anymore anyway. It's better this way. She doesn't need the stress of owning a property." She chuckled. "Plus, we could really use the cash right now." My heart dropped. They were selling my home. My home. Not theirs. Not something they bought or earned. They were treating it like a prize they inherited. But I was still alive. That night, I sat in the laundry room, my only real place of privacy, and cried quietly. I didn't want them to hear me. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction. But the tears came anyway, not just for the house, not just for Carl, but for how easily I was being erased. I knew I needed to act. I may not have had a key to the house, but I still had something they didn't know about. My memory. Before leaving for Atlanta, I had written down a list of our bank accounts, passwords, contacts, and the name of our lawyer. I kept it in an old hardcover cookbook tucked in my suitcase. One of the only things Brianna hadn't bothered to touch because she hated recipes. That list became my lifeline. One morning, while they were out shopping, I searched the garage for my storage trunk. It had been pushed into a corner and covered with old moving blankets. Inside was the original deed to our house, several documents Carl had kept locked away, and the signed power of attorney form that had my name on it, not David's. I could still legally make decisions about the house. They didn't know that. Yet. I hid the paperwork deep in my suitcase, wrapped in my nightgown, and zipped it shut. I would need help, someone on the outside, but with no phone, no internet, and no freedom to leave the house without a chaperone, I had to wait. Time would become my weapon. A week later, the opportunity came. Brianna got invited to a friend's baby shower. David had a work emergency and had to leave town for 2 nights. They were both gone, and for the first time in weeks, I was alone and free. I walked 2 blocks barefoot until I found a neighbor raking leaves. I told him I was Judith, just Judith, and asked if I could borrow his phone. He hesitated, then handed it over, and I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My old neighbor, Gloria. She picked up in 2 rings. "Judith, is that you?" Her voice cracked and I nearly cried again. "Gloria," I whispered, "I need your help. Please, don't tell anyone I called." Gloria didn't ask too many questions, at least not at first. All she said was, "Stay right where you are. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And she was. Pulling up in her old blue minivan, she flung the door open and practically tackled me in a hug. "You look thinner," she said, holding my face in her hands. "What have they been doing to you?" I shook my head. "I'll explain everything, but right now I need to go to the bank." We didn't waste time. With the documents from my storage trunk, I proved my identity and requested a temporary hold on all joint accounts. I also asked for a new card and had a portion of the funds transferred into a private account. One Carl had opened for emergencies. This was that emergency. The bank teller looked at me with a mix of pity and surprise, but she didn't say a word, just nodded as I signed every paper with a shaking hand. After that, we visited my lawyer's office. He hadn't heard from me in years but remembered Carl well. When I showed him the property deed and explained what was happening, he leaned back in his chair and said one thing that made my heart leap. "You still own the house. They have no legal claim. You want to stop the sale? I'll file the injunction today." My hands trembled again, but this time it was relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt power coming back into my chest, like I wasn't just some burden they tossed aside. I was still me, still Judith. But we couldn't stop there, because I had no intention of going back to that house and pretending nothing happened. Gloria and I came up with a plan. Quiet, careful, and impossible for them to predict. She offered me her guest room until I figured things out. I accepted with a grateful heart and 1,000 thank yous. That night, I finally slept without fear. No locked doors, no footsteps pacing the hallway, no whispers behind my back. Just silence and safety. The next morning, I made my final move. I called David. He picked up on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, Mom, everything okay? We're about to leave the shower." I kept my voice steady. "I won't be there when you get home." Pause. "What do you mean?" "I left," I said calmly. "And I know what you've been trying to do with the house. It's over, David. I've spoken to my lawyer. The sale's blocked. You can't touch anything." Silence. Then, "What the hell are you talking about? Who put that idea in your head?" "You did," I replied, "when you stopped treating me like your mother and started treating me like baggage." Then I hung up. The calls started pouring in within an hour. Brianna, David, unknown numbers, voicemails filled with fake concern, anger, guilt-tripping. Brianna even left one message that said, "You're blowing this way out of proportion, Judith. We only wanted what was best for you." Sure, selling my house behind my back was best for me. They didn't even realize I had already contacted the real estate agent they were using and put a full stop to everything. The agent apologized and promised to stay out of family affairs from now on. Smart choice. But just when I thought things were calming down, something strange happened. 3 days later, Gloria's mailbox was opened and emptied. Her backyard gate was left swinging open. And one night, I noticed a car parked across the street for over an hour. Lights off, engine running. David knew where Gloria lived. I knew it was him. And it wasn't over yet. I had stopped the house from being stolen, sure, but now I was going to find out just how far they were willing to go to punish me for standing up. It started with small things. A knock on Gloria's door with no one outside. Her garden hose left running all night when we knew it had been shut. A tire slashed, nothing too dangerous, but just enough to rattle the nerves. I didn't want to believe David would stoop so low, but every sign pointed to him or someone he'd roped in to scare me back into submission. Gloria was furious. "This is intimidation," she said. "He thinks he can bully you back into silence." She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't scared anymore. The next day, I went back to the lawyer. Not to block a sale, this time for something bigger. Carl had always kept things in order, our wills, our estate, everything. But what I hadn't known until now was that Carl had also left behind an updated video will, one he'd recorded months before he passed. "I never wanted the boys to fight," he said on the screen. "If anything happens to me, I trust Judith to do what's right. She gets full authority over the house and accounts. No one, not even David, has the right to overrule her." Tears welled in my eyes watching him speak, his voice firm and kind, his eyes tired but clear. It was like Carl had come back just long enough to put a hand on my shoulder and say, "You're not alone." The will changed everything. My lawyer filed for an emergency injunction, this time to legally bar David and Brianna from making any further financial claims or attempts to access the property. We even submitted evidence of their recent intimidation tactics. "You're not just defending yourself now," my lawyer said. "You're building a case. A case that could cost them more than just reputation. It could cost them custody of their daughter. Because that's when the most unexpected thing happened. Emma called me. David's and Brianna's little girl, just 11 years old. She left a voicemail on Gloria's phone, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grandma, can I come live with you? Mommy and Daddy won't stop yelling, 'I miss you.'" My stomach dropped. Gloria and I looked at each other in disbelief. I called her back immediately. Emma answered and cried into the phone for a full minute before she could speak. She told me everything. How they fought every night. How Brianna smashed a plate just 2 nights ago, and David kicked the wall so hard it left a hole. How they told Emma, "Grandma's dead to us." But Emma, she didn't believe that. She kept a picture of me under her pillow. "I just want to come home," she said. That was the final blow. I spoke to my lawyer again, and we contacted Child Protective Services. I submitted the voicemail and filed for temporary guardianship. It wasn't easy. David and Brianna fought it hard. They called me a manipulator, told the court I was senile, said I was making things up to steal their child. But I had Carl's will, Emma's call, and evidence of intimidation on my side. And slowly, the truth began to crush their lies. The judge granted me supervised visitation rights with Emma while the investigation continued. When she saw me for the first time after weeks, she ran into my arms and wouldn't let go. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. That moment broke something open inside me. Not fear, not anger, just the quiet realization that I hadn't lost everything. They tried to strip me of my home, my dignity, my name, but they couldn't take away my love. Still, David wasn't done. A week later, I received a letter. No return address, just one sentence scribbled in thick black ink. "You should have stayed gone." And that's when I realized this war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. But I wasn't scared anymore, because now I had everything to fight back with. The letter had no return address, just that single venomous line, "You should have stayed gone." I remember sitting on the couch, staring at it for minutes that felt like hours. It didn't shake me like it would have a month ago. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just got up, walked to my desk, and added the letter to the folder labeled Evidence, because I finally understood. Fear was their only weapon, and I wasn't afraid anymore. The next hearing was different. David didn't look smug anymore. Brianna wasn't dressed like she was going to brunch. They looked tired, pale, nervous. My lawyer had submitted everything. The voicemail from Emma, the threatening letter, surveillance footage Gloria had captured of someone circling my house at 2 a.m. We even had screenshots of Brianna's nasty texts to Emma, calling her a traitor and blaming her for the CPS investigation. The judge reviewed every piece silently, and then he spoke. "I've seen many ugly family disputes," he said, looking at all of us. "But what I see here is emotional neglect, manipulation, and a failure to protect a child from a hostile environment." He looked right at me. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you still wish to seek guardianship?" I didn't even blink. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." He nodded once, and then, slowly, deliberately, he banged the gavel. "Full custody granted to Judith Caldwell, immediate transfer of care authorized." Brianna stood up and screamed. "She turned our daughter against us. This is your fault, David. I told you she was a snake." David looked like he wanted to disappear. Security escorted them out of the courtroom as Brianna sobbed and cursed the air. Emma sat beside me, clutching my hand tightly. "Are we really going home, Grandma?" she whispered. I smiled, for real this time. "Yes, sweetheart, we're finally going home." The house was different now. Not because the paint had changed or the furniture had moved, but because there was laughter again. Emma filled the rooms with music, stories, silly questions, and her little projects. She even started planting a vegetable garden in Carl's old patch. "Grandpa would have liked this," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I think he's watching." I nodded, tears rising. "Me too." And then, one final piece of closure came. 2 weeks after the court ruling, I received a package in the mail. No return address again, but this time it wasn't a threat. Inside was a small box, a memory stick, and a folded piece of paper that read, "I found this after Dad passed. It belongs to you. I'm sorry. Nathan, my other son." He hadn't taken sides during the fight. He'd gone quiet, distant. I thought he didn't care, but maybe he was watching. Maybe he was grieving in his own way. I plugged in the memory stick that night. It was a home video from years ago. Carl and I sitting on the porch, Emma crawling between our legs as a toddler. David was there too, laughing, Brianna holding the camera. We were a family. Before greed and bitterness cracked the seams, Carl looked into the camera at the end and said something I'd forgotten until that moment. "No matter what happens, this house, this family, will stand." Because love built it. And love doesn't crumble easily. The story didn't end with revenge or even justice. It ended with truth and love. And a little girl who reminded me that I still had something worth fighting for. David and Brianna? They moved to another state. The court ordered them into counseling, and Emma's therapist says she's starting to feel safe again. As for me, I found strength I didn't know I had. I found a purpose. And I found my voice. So, to anyone listening, if you've ever been told you're just a burden, remember this. You're not. You never were. And one day, the people who threw you away may learn that they lost the very heart of the home they tried to claim. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched you in any way, please like, share, and subscribe for more true stories that remind us just how powerful a single voice can be. And tell me in the comments, which part of the story hit you the hardest? And before I go, don't forget to tell me which country you're watching this video from. I read every comment, and your support means the world. Until next time, stay strong.